I'm Aaron, and this happened to me in Bend, Oregon in June of 2020. I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions. Most problems have explanations, and the ones that don't usually turn out to be human error once you dig long enough. That mindset has followed me everywhere in life, especially into moments where fear would have been the easier reaction, which is why this still bothers me. That summer, everything felt muted. I was working remote full-time, living inside the same walls every day, trying to keep my routines intact. The one thing keeping me sane was getting outside with my dog, Ranger. Long hikes, familiar trails, anything that reminded me the world still worked the way it used to. Ranger is a German Shepherd mix, big, calm, and trained. He doesn't bark at strangers, doesn't pull on the leash. I spent years working with him, and he'd earned my trust completely. That evening, after a hike near Shevlin Park, I realized I had no food at home. I decided to stop at the grocery store on the way back. Just a quick run. Chicken, rice, coffee. Nothing complicated. It was late enough that the store felt tired. A few people scattered through the aisles. That quiet end-of-day feeling where everyone's just trying to finish one last task and go home. Ranger was leashed and walking close, like always. We turned toward the meat section, and he stopped. His body went rigid, his ears lifted, his head lowered slightly. Then he growled, a low warning that didn't match his personality at all. I assumed it was a smell at first. Raw meat, cleaning chemicals, something like that. I gave the leash a light tug and told him to keep moving. He didn't. That's when I looked up. A man stood near the meat coolers. He had no cart and no basket, hands at his sides, not browsing, not looking at prices, just standing there and watching us. What stood out immediately wasn't his appearance. He looked completely normal. Hoodie, jeans, average build, the kind of guy you'd pass without remembering. What stood out was his stillness and the fact that he didn't react at all to a large dog growling at him. Most people would step back, laugh nervously, raise their hands. He didn't move. He just watched Ranger like he was curious how far the situation would go. I didn't like that. I shifted direction, guiding Ranger toward the next aisle, telling myself I was resetting the moment. Ranger followed, but his tension didn't ease. His head kept turning, tracking the man even after we'd moved away. I grabbed a bag of frozen vegetables with one hand, pretending to shop. My other hand stayed tight on the leash. Then I heard footsteps behind us, approaching. I looked over my shoulder, and the man was closer now, standing at the opening between aisles, still empty-handed, still watching. Ranger growled again, louder this time, angling his body between me and the man. The guy moved his head slightly, almost amused. "He knows," he said. I forced a laugh. "Sorry, he's usually not like this." The man's eyes stayed on Ranger. "Smart dog." Then he walked. Not away. Past us. Close enough that Ranger pressed against my leg, blocking. The leash went taut. The growl deepened, sharper now. The man brushed by like the aisle was narrow, even though it wasn't. He didn't slow, didn't look at the shelves, didn't pretend to shop. He just passed us and kept going. The second he turned the corner and disappeared, Ranger relaxed instantly, like a switch had been flipped. That unsettled me more than anything else. I decided I didn't need groceries anymore. I headed straight for the front. I didn't see the man again inside the store. At self-checkout, I paid for the frozen vegetables and a bottle of water, just the things I was already holding. Outside, the air was warm. The parking lot felt normal. Ranger walked calmly again. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird interaction. People are strange. Then I heard a cart rattle. I looked toward the cart corral. The man was standing there, hoodie on, hands down, watching the store entrance. Ranger stopped again. This time he didn't growl. He leaned into me, protective. I didn't stare. I didn't confront him. I walked to my car, got Ranger inside, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. Driving home, I tried to reason it out. Maybe the guy was messing with people. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe I was projecting tension onto a normal situation. But one detail wouldn't let go. I never saw him shop. No basket, no items, no purpose. He stood, he waited. And the only time he moved was when he chose to move toward us. I still trust logic, I still look for explanations. But now, when Ranger reacts to someone, when his body stiffens and his attention locks, I listen. Because whatever that man was doing in that store, my dog understood it long before I did. And I don't think he was there to buy anything. It was a weekday evening after a long workday. The kind where your brain feels overused, but your body still has errands to run. I stopped at a grocery store on the way home because my pantry was empty, and I didn't feel like ordering takeout again. Inside, everything was normal. Bright lights, background music, people moving through aisles on autopilot. I loaded my cart with too much stuff. Canned food, drinks, paper towels, heavy items that made the cart awkward to push. By the time I checked out, I was already mentally halfway home. As I pushed my cart toward the exit, a man stepped aside to let me pass. He wore a lanyard with a badge, the kind store employees wear. It looked real enough. Logo, photo, name, slightly worn, like it had been used for a long time. "Need help with that?" he asked. Normally I would have said no. But the badge did something subtle. It placed him inside the system. Not a stranger approaching me in a parking lot, just an employee being helpful. And my cart was heavy. "Sure," I said. "Thanks." He smiled and took the front of the cart, not the side. He took control of it like it was already his job. "Long day?" he asked as we walked. "Yeah," I said. "Work stuff." "What do you do?" I told him. "HR." He reacted faster than expected. "Oh," he said, "so you know everybody." It wasn't a joke. It sounded like a note being made. We walked out into the parking lot. Early evening, plenty of cars, people loading groceries, headlights flashing on and off. Normal. "You live close?" he asked. That was the first question that didn't belong. "Not far," I said, vague. "Anyone waiting on you?" he asked next. I looked at him. His tone hadn't changed, but the way he watched me did, like he was checking for answers that made things easier. "No," I said. He nodded, satisfied. We were walking down the main parking aisle when he turned the cart left, toward a quieter section of the lot behind a row of trucks. "I'm actually this way," I said quickly, reaching for the handle. He laughed like I'd misunderstood something. "Oh, I thought you parked over here." I didn't. He kept pushing for another second before letting the cart shift back. At my car, I popped the trunk. He immediately started loading bags. Fast. Efficient. Confident. Too confident. "I can help," I said. "I'll take care of you," he replied. That phrase landed wrong. He leaned farther into the trunk than necessary, eyes scanning the inside of my car like he was checking something off a list. I stepped closer to my driver's door without really thinking about it, just positioning. "What kind of car is this?" he asked. I started to answer, then stopped. Why did he need to know? I looked more closely at his badge. The photo looked older than it should have been. The plastic sleeve was scratched in the same spot, like a thumb had rubbed it over and over. The number at the bottom stuck in my head. Another question came. Then another. "You shop here a lot? Usually alone?" None of it was aggressive. That was the problem. It all sounded normal, until it didn't. I made a decision. "I forgot something inside," I said suddenly. "I'll be right back." "I can grab it," he said immediately. "No, it's fine," I said, already moving. He followed me for a step before stopping. I didn't run. I walked quickly and with purpose, back into the store and went straight to customer service. "I just had a question," I told the manager. "There's a man outside helping me load groceries. He's wearing a badge. I wanted to confirm he's an employee." She nodded. "Do you know his name?" I didn't catch it, but I saw the badge number. I told her. She typed it in. Her expression changed instantly. That badge number belongs to a former employee, she said. He was terminated a few years ago. The words didn't register right away. Are you sure? I asked. Yes. We walked to the front windows and looked out into the parking lot. My car was there. The trunk was still open. The man was gone. No lanyard, no badge, no helpful stranger, just an empty space where he'd been seconds earlier. The store called security. Someone mentioned the cameras. Someone else asked me to describe him. The police arrived later, but by then it was just details and guesses. No clear footage, no license plate, nothing solid enough to chase. I drove home with my thoughts running on a loop. The badge, the way he took the cart, the attempt to redirect me to a quieter part of the lot, the confidence. He left the moment I stepped away, like he knew exactly how much time he had before things stopped being easy. I don't know what would have happened if I'd let him guide me to that other spot. I don't know if it would have been theft or something worse. What I do know is this. All it took for him to get close was a badge that looked real enough. And ever since then, I don't trust uniforms the way I used to. Because that night taught me how thin the line really is between helpful and dangerous. My name is Nora, and I was in my second year of grad school, which meant my life felt like a loop of deadlines, half-read articles, and meals I ate standing up. That night, I went to the grocery store because my fridge was empty, and I needed something normal. Eggs, rice, frozen vegetables. The kind of errands that make you feel like a functioning adult. It was early evening, dark outside, but not late. The store had that in-between energy. Families grabbing dinner stuff, a few older shoppers moving slowly, and scattered people like me who looked tired and alone. I grabbed a basket instead of a cart. I always did that when I wanted to keep the trip short. The first time I noticed him, I didn't really notice him. I was in the pasta aisle, staring at jars like I was making a meaningful choice, when I saw a guy at the far end near the end cap. Hoodie, baseball cap, hands in his pockets. No cart, no basket. I looked once, then went back to my list. Nothing about it felt important. The second time it felt familiar. I'd moved to the dairy section, standing in front of the eggs when I saw him again, this time by the yogurt, still empty-handed. That's when my brain started doing what it always does, filling in explanations. Maybe he's waiting on someone, maybe he forgot his list. Maybe he's just drifting. I grabbed eggs and moved on. The third time was when the pattern started to feel intentional. I turned into the baking aisle to grab cinnamon. I'd barely walked 10 feet when I heard footsteps enter behind me. I slowed down, pretending to read labels, and looked back. It was him. The timing was wrong. Too quick, like he'd been watching which aisle I chose. He wasn't close enough to invade my space. He wasn't doing anything aggressive. He just stood there, neutral, like he belonged exactly where he was. I left the aisle. I told myself I was being dramatic. Grocery stores are shared spaces. People overlap. Still, I started paying attention. I moved to canned soups. He appeared near the end of the aisle. I cut toward cleaning supplies. He showed up again. Every time I changed direction, he followed, never immediately, never rushing, just soon enough that it couldn't be random. What made it worse was what he wasn't doing. He never picked anything up, never read labels, never paused to compare items. He just stayed. I tried to test it. I walked down one aisle like I knew where I was going, then abruptly turned around and doubled back. Normal people react to that. They step aside. They look surprised. He didn't. He adjusted like direction didn't matter, as long as he stayed near me. At that point, my basket felt heavier, even though I hadn't added much. I didn't want to finish my list anymore. I just wanted to leave. I headed toward the front and chose a self-checkout that faced the parking lot windows. I wanted to see if he was still inside. I scanned my items quickly. Eggs, soup, cinnamon, a bag of frozen vegetables I grabbed without thinking. I looked up again and again. I didn't see him. Relief hit so fast it felt embarrassing, like I'd scared myself over nothing. I paid, grabbed my bag, and walked out. The air outside was sharp with early fall cold. Parking lot lights glowed against the dark sky. I walked toward my car and pressed the unlock button. My headlights blinked. That's when I saw him. He was already outside, not walking out behind me, not carrying groceries, just standing near the row where my car was parked like he'd been there waiting. He wasn't leaning on anything, wasn't on his phone, just standing, watching me. I stopped walking. I didn't run. I didn't turn around dramatically. I slowed like I'd forgotten something, keys tight in my hand. He didn't move toward me. That was the worst part. If he'd approached, I could justify yelling or running. But he stayed exactly where he was, calm, patient, holding the moment right on the edge where nothing had technically happened. That's when it hit me. This was intentional. He was keeping it deniable. I turned around and walked back into the store. Inside, the lights felt too bright. Music played like nothing was wrong. People checked out groceries, completely unaware. I went straight to customer service. "Can someone walk me to my car?" I asked. The woman didn't question it. She waved over a tall employee with a badge, and we walked out together. I scanned the parking lot the entire time. He was gone. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there shaking, angry at myself for it, even though I didn't know what else I was supposed to feel. I drove home carefully, checking my mirrors more than the road. Nothing followed me. Later, when I tried to explain why I stopped grocery shopping at night, I struggled. Because nothing happened. No threats, no words, no moment I could point to and say, that's when it crossed the line. But I changed anyway. I parked under lights. I shopped earlier. I stopped giving strangers the benefit of the doubt just because they hadn't done anything yet. Because the scariest part wasn't that he followed me. It was how easy it was for him to stay just barely on the right side of normal. Like the real step was saved for when no one else was around. I'm an elementary school teacher. I'm used to juggling attention, keeping track of 20 kids at once, reading moods, spotting problems before they turn loud. I've always trusted that skill, especially when it comes to my own child. That evening was nothing special, just a quick grocery run after work. Early evening, cold outside, the store warm and busy in that ordinary way, carts squeaking, overhead announcements, soft music playing like background noise nobody really hears. My son Mason was 5. He was in a cooperative phase that felt like a small miracle. He stayed close, asked questions, read signs out loud. I let him walk beside the cart instead of sitting in it because he'd earned that freedom. Or at least I thought he had. We moved through the store methodically. Produce, bread, pantry stuff. Normal. Predictable. He asked for something unnecessary. I said no. He accepted it with a dramatic sigh and moved on. When we reached the dairy section, I turned the cart sideways to open the milk door. "Stay with me," I said without looking at him. "Okay," he replied. I grabbed a gallon of milk, set it in the cart, turned back for eggs, and Mason was gone. "Mason?" I called, calmly at first. Nothing. I stepped forward, scanning the aisle, then behind me. The cart suddenly felt like a bad decision. "Mason," I said again, louder. Still nothing. I moved fast. Running means you've accepted the worst. I wasn't there yet. The aisle next to us was shorter, more open. Crackers and snacks on one side, fewer people. And that's where I saw him. Mason stood near an end cap, holding a small box like he'd found something interesting. Beside him, crouched down at his level, was a man. Not an employee, No vest, no badge. Just a man in a dark jacket and jeans, balanced comfortably on his heels like he belonged there. He was talking to my son. I didn't hear everything at first. Just his tone. Soft, calm, the kind of voice adults use when they want kids to trust them. Then I got closer. "Do you live close?" the man asked. Mason shrugged. "I don't know." The man nodded like that was fine. "Where's your house?" he asked. That's when my body took over. I pushed the cart forward hard enough that the wheels rattled. "What are you doing?" I said. My voice was controlled, the same voice I use with angry parents or escalating classrooms. Firm, calm, and final. The man looked up at me slowly. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away, didn't look surprised. "Oh," he said lightly, "there you are." I stepped between him and Mason and pulled my son behind me. "Mason," I said, not looking at him, "stand behind me." He did. The man stood up, unhurried, relaxed. He didn't apologize. He didn't rush. "I was just helping him find you," he said. It was said so casually that, out of context, it might have sounded reasonable. "Helping," I repeated, "by asking him where we live." He blinked once, processing, then shrugged. "Kids wander," he said. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a statement. Like that closed the conversation. "Step away from my child," I said again, teacher voice. He looked around like checking who was nearby. Then he smiled like he understood the situation better than I did. "All right," he said, and he walked away. I watched him disappear down the aisle, my eyes locked on his back until he turned the corner. Only then did my hands start to feel tight. My jaw ached like I'd been clenching it without realizing. "Mom," Mason said quietly. I crouched in front of him immediately, checking him like he'd been hurt. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Did he touch you?" I asked. "No," he said. "He just talked." "What did he say?" I asked. "He asked where our house is," Mason said, "and where you parked." That knot in my chest tightened. "Did you tell him?" I asked. Mason shook his head. "No, he already knew my name." I froze, not physically but internally. That silent click of alarm you can't ignore. "He said your name?" I asked. Mason nodded. He said, "Mason, where's your mom?" My mind raced through every possibility. Maybe he overheard me. Maybe I said it louder than I remembered. Maybe Mason's name was on his jacket. But I didn't remember saying his name. I remembered saying, "Stay with me." I took Mason's hand and didn't let go again. At the front of the store, I spoke to customer service, then a manager. I kept my voice calm, but I didn't soften it. I described the man. I explained what he asked. Security did a sweep. He was gone. The police came later. They took a report, but there was nothing concrete. No threats, no touching, just questions. That night, after Mason was asleep, I replayed everything. The man's posture, his voice, the way he left like he'd done nothing wrong. The part that stayed with me wasn't the questions. It was the confidence. He didn't act like someone who'd crossed a line. He acted like someone who thought he was allowed to stand there. I still take my son grocery shopping. I still believe most people are just people. But I don't let him wander anymore. Not even one aisle. And I still don't know how that man knew my son's name. That's the part that never settled. My name is Kendra, and this happened to me in Tucson, Arizona in August of 2022, when I was 19 and still new enough at my job to assume that feeling uncomfortable meant I was overreacting. It was a late shift at the grocery store. It wasn't overnight, but late enough that the place felt hollowed out. The dinner rush was gone. Families were home, the lights were still bright, the air still cold, but everything else felt tired. I was working a middle register where you can see down a few aisles if you look up at the right angle. Aisle 6 was one of them. Long, straight, and well lit. Paper towels, cleaning supplies, storage bags, an aisle that usually stayed empty late at night. I was bored in that heavy end-of-shift way. My feet hurt. I kept checking the clock, counting how many customers stood between me and going home. And then I noticed her. At first, it didn't feel strange. She was standing at the end of aisle 6, near where the aisle opened into the main walkway. I assumed she was waiting for someone. People do that all the time. But then I realized she wasn't moving. No cart, no basket, no phone in her hands. Her arms hung at her sides, relaxed, like she wasn't planning to shop at all. She was facing into the aisle, but angled just enough that I could tell she could see my register without turning her head. I rang up a customer, handed him a receipt, and looked back up. She was still there. I tried to rationalize it. Some people take breaks while shopping. Some people stand and think. I told myself it was nothing, but time passed, more than a few minutes. Enough for the song on the speakers to change twice. Enough for me to restock bags under my register. Every time I looked up, she was in the same spot. What bothered me wasn't that she stood there. It was how she stood. People who are waiting usually fidget, look around, check their phone. She didn't do any of that. She wasn't bored. She looked focused. I leaned toward the cashier next to me, an older woman named Rosa who'd worked there forever. "Do you see that lady?" I asked her. Rosa looked up, followed my gaze, and shrugged. Some people are weird. That was it. No concern. No second look. I tried to stop watching. Tried to focus on my register. But it's hard not to notice someone who never leaves your peripheral vision. Eventually, I decided to handle it like an adult. I told myself I'd walk near aisle 6 like I was zoning shelves. If she needed help, she'd ask. If she was just standing there, she'd probably move once someone approached. When my lane was empty, I grabbed a few go-back items and stepped out from behind the register. As I walked toward aisle 6, my body felt alert in a way I couldn't explain. Up close, she looked normal. Maybe mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back, plain clothes. Nothing about her screamed danger. She wasn't looking at products. She was staring down the aisle, like she was listening for something. I stopped at the end cap and pretended to straighten paper towels. My hands felt clumsy. She didn't step away, didn't give me space. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward me, just enough to speak without fully facing me. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just those words. My brain tried to attach meaning to them and failed. "What?" I asked. She didn't respond. She turned her attention back down the aisle like the conversation was over. I backed away, keeping my movements controlled, and returned to my register. My face felt warm. The store suddenly felt too open, too exposed. I leaned toward Rosa again. "I'm getting the manager." Rosa frowned. "Why?" "She said something," I replied. I didn't repeat the words. The shift manager followed me toward aisle 6, already looking skeptical. "Point her out," he said. But she was gone. "Maybe she left," he said after a quick scan. "She didn't have anything," I said. "She never shopped." He shrugged. "I'll check." He walked off like it wasn't urgent, like it wasn't anything. I finished my shift on autopilot, ringing up customers while constantly checking aisle 6. The store felt different now. Not unsafe exactly, but unreliable. Near closing, I asked if they could check the cameras. The manager came back annoyed. Aisle 6 wasn't recording. Blind spot. Of course it was. That detail stuck with me more than anything else, because it made me realize how many gaps existed in a place I'd assumed was protected just because it was bright and staffed. Rosa walked me to my car that night. She joked about it, but she stayed close. I kept scanning the parking lot, expecting to see that same figure near the cart return or under the lights. I didn't. Nothing happened after that. No confrontation, no explanation. And that's what made it worse. Maybe she was warning me. Maybe she was threatening me. Maybe she meant it for someone else, and I happened to be there. All three possibilities left the same feeling behind. I quit that job a few weeks later. I told them it was because of school. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that every time I looked down aisle 6, I heard that whisper again. And I couldn't tell whether I'd been chosen or whether I'd just stepped into something I wasn't supposed to see. And I still don't know which one scares me more. If these stories made you rethink how safe public spaces really are, smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next scare, and tell me which story stuck with you the most. And if snowstorms still feel cozy to you, don't worry, we can fix that. Click now to watch 4 really disturbing snowstorm stories, because nothing says horror like zero visibility and unanswered footprints. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.